What is happening, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to week 4 wide receiver start sit video. If you guys been enjoying the content, please smash the like, subscribe. We got a bunch of other videos out there. We're going to give you guys every wide receiver you need to absolutely start and the ones that you need to sit. We're going to give you some spectacular betting props, some wonderful DFS tertiary sleeper options. We're going to tell you guys which ones will definitively give you that return on investment as a pay up option. If you guys like the video, once again, like the video, subscribe if you haven't already. Shout out to our sponsors, Drafters Fantasy. I'm kind of losing it right now because this is my third recording in a row, and I've been doing all the slides and all that stuff. But nevertheless, I digress. Let's get right into it. Game 1, we got the Seattle Seahawks, who are 1 point favorites, coming into Arizona. The over-under is 43.5. You got Jackson Smith in Jigba, who has been absolutely special and spectacular on a weekly basis and will continue to do so in a plus matchup. And we'll tell you guys why it's a plus match shortly versus Marvin Harrison Jr., the guy who's been dropping a heck of a lot of passes and also been dropping in my rankings as well. So let's talk about what Arizona allows and why I love this matchup for Jackson Smith and Jigba. For starters, their defense funnels targets to wide receivers. Actually, the most targets go to wide receivers who play against the Arizona Cardinals at 26.33, which translates to the most receptions allowed to opposing wide receivers at 16.0 and the seventh most receiving yards at 164.67. It's a smash matchup, smash situation. On the other side, it's not a smash matchup, not a smash situation. The Seattle Seahawks are one of the best defenses in football, not an advantageous matchup for Marvin Harrison Jr. So we're not going to project him high. He's going to have to get lucky by one, catching the ball finally, and two, finding the end zone. So based off of tiers here, we got Jackson Smith and Jigba, who was very close to going into the S tier and may start going into the S tier after this week moving forward. And Marvin Harrison Jr. in the D tier, where you kind of have to start him, but you don't want to. All right, game 2, we got the Minnesota Vikings and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Game kicks off in Dublin at 9:30 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday morning. The Vikings are 2.5-point favorites. The over-under is 41.0. So let's get into the tail of the tape. Minnesota is not an advantageous matchup for wide receivers whatsoever. So good luck to DK Metcalf starters. As for Pittsburgh, the Pittsburgh Steelers allowed the 8th most receptions to wide receivers at 13.33 receptions. Jordan Addison's coming back, but we're not going to put him as a must start. Like, I understand if you flex him, especially if you have a lot of injuries going on right now. Justin Jefferson, you kind of have to start. So for that, Justin Jefferson's in the B tier. And then DK Metcalf has that touchdown upside, and he has the volume going for him. So he's going to go into the C tier for us there as well. All right, next game, we got the Carolina Panthers visiting the New England Patriots. The Panthers are 5.5-point underdogs. The over-under is 43.5. And you got Tedero McMillan, who's a smash start in my opinion, and I'll tell you exactly why, against Stephon Diggs. But I will say temper with caution, because even though Carolina allows absolutely nothing to opposing wide receivers, Drake May has been finding ways to go out of his way to break these advantageous matchups. Like, the Carolina Panthers are one of the least advantageous matchups in football when it comes to wide receiver production. It's absolutely crazy. Whereas New England, without Christian Gonzalez, and that's the caveat here, they allow the 9th most receiving yards to opposing wide receivers at 163.33 receiving yards per game, the 5th most yards per catch at 14.41. So longest reception is definitely something that we're looking at for Tedero McMillan. They're tied for 3rd most receiving touchdowns, and a lot of teams allow this number, 1.33 receiving touchdowns. It's still a heck of a lot, and it's above league average, and that's why we're pointing it out. So with that being said, Stephon Diggs is a must bet because it's just not very reliable. And then we're going to put Tedero McMillan in the B tier. He'd be higher if, like, he would go into the A tier if we knew for a fact that Christian Gonzalez is not starting again and missing another week. And he'd also be way higher if it wasn't freaking Bryce Young throwing him the football. Next game, we got the Cleveland Browns, who are 9-point dogs, coming into Detroit indoors at the Ford Field. I believe that's what it's called. 44.5 is the over-under. I'd like it higher. But once again, this is one of the best defenses in football against a team that kind of gives up a lot of production. So the balance is very interesting. Cleveland allows the 3rd most receiving touchdowns, tied for 1.33, but a lot of those numbers are skewed based off of the one outrageous performance we saw Lamar Jackson have in week 2, where he put up 4 receiving touchdowns. Aside from that, Cleveland's been rather decent, not going to lie. Detroit, on the other hand, allows the second most receiving touchdowns. They stand alone at 1.5 receiving touchdowns per game. The 5th most receiving yards at 175.5, and this is just to the wide receiver position for what it's worth. 6th most yards per reception at 14.04. So it's an absolute advantageous matchup for Jerry Jeudy. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, even though it's not the greatest matchup, will be in the S tier moving forward. I'm going to start putting some respect on his name because I've been very disrespectful to Mr. Sun God in the offseason. I apologize, man. I generally apologize from the bottom of my heart. He's really him, and he's the real deal. As for Jerry Jeudy, he's in the D tier. It's a fantastic matchup, but Joe Flacco is the quarterback. Let's be real. All right, next game, we got the Los Angeles Chargers, who's 6.5-point favorites, coming to New York. The over-under against the Giants, the over-under is 44.0. And let's just talk about what the Chargers allow to opposing wide receivers, which is absolutely nothing, and what the Giants have been doing aside from playing the Dallas Cowboys that 1 week has been putting up absolute nothing numbers. For what it's worth, this is a terrible matchup for Malik Neighbors, but he gets Jackson Dart, and they're at home, and I feel like we're going to see something that has nothing to do with statistics and the analytics. We're just going to see these two connect at a very high rate. I wouldn't be shocked if he finishes as the wide receiver 1. This is what we've been waiting for. No more Russell Wilson. Spectacular. On the other end, it's actually a fantastic matchup, and you could start or flex Keenan Allen, Ladd McConkey, or Quinn Johnson. I wouldn't blame you. They're all startable. They're all flexible. But we're going to talk about Keenan Allen here because he's the most reliable, and where where he lines up on the football field tracks with what the Giants give up production-wise. And what the Giants do give up to opposing wide receivers is the second most receiving yards at 195.67 yards per game, second most receptions at 15.33 receptions per game, and 1 receiving touchdown allowed per game. And there's a big jumble of wide receivers there. So we're going to put Keenan Allen in the B tier because he's elite and spectacular. We're going to put Neighbors in his ceiling, and the call that we're making in the A tier, even though, his floor is borderline D tier, but I like the mix-up and the change that they have here. What I don't like is this next matchup. We got the New Orleans Saints, who are 16.5-point dogs, coming into Buffalo. The over-under is actually 48, which is incredible. It's one of the higher implied point totals. And the New Orleans Saints allow the third. So you got Chris Olave, could be Rashid Shaheed, versus Khalil Shakir, could be Keon Coleman, but we're going to go with the more consistent guys, the guys with the safer floor, and ultimately give you the higher ceiling because other guys just don't have a floor whatsoever, Shaheed or Keon Coleman. So Saints allow the 3rd most receiving touchdowns, tied with that jumble of group that we alluded to earlier at 1.33. The 7th most receiving yards, the 7th most yards per reception at 13.74. So chunks for sure, which is well within Khalil Shakir's gameplay, especially within the slot situation that they hemorrhage production to. Buffalo is tied for the 3rd most receiving touchdowns at 1.33. So there is receiving touchdown upside, but I don't trust it. With that being said, they both go into the D tier because the game script can get severely out of hand. And I anticipate that the running game and James Cook are going to be the guys who take it away. And it's going to be tough for the wide receivers to get there. It's tough to project a high ceiling when the floor is not even that high either. Next game. This is a good game. All right. So we just went to a group of games that made me depressed, but this game is fantastic. We got the Philadelphia Eagles, who are 3.5-point favorites, coming into Tampa Bay. The over-under is 43.5. I like the over in this game. You got A.J. Brown against Emeka Egbuka. So let's talk about where this matchup is advantageous. Philadelphia allows the 10th most targets to wide receivers, and Tampa Bay allows the 9th most targets to wide receivers. The reason why this is advantageous in terms of the situation for Emeka Egbuka is, we know that Mike Evans is out. We still have yet to learn if Chris Godwin's going to play, but if Chris Godwin does play, it's going to be very limited. So we're talking about 20 plus targets where 13 to 15 should in fact go to Emeka Egbuka, if not more, because it is tough sledding for that running room, especially with the limited offensive linemen they do have, even though the Eagles' run defense is not what it once was, and you guys could see that on a running backs video. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, ninth most targets. And the reason why I like this for A.J. Brown and potentially Devonta Smith is because, like, it's tough to run the football against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and Vita Vea. Obviously, Saquon Barkley has one of the best offensive lines in football, but nevertheless, it's still easier production for wide receivers to get chunk plays. And A.J. Brown is one of the greatest chunk play players in the NFL. So with that being said, we got Emeka Egbuka in the A tier, A.J. Brown in the B tier. Devonta Smith is somewhere in the D tier, but I just don't have enough slides or room on my thingamajig here. All right, next game, another game that depresses me terribly. And no, we don't have Calvin Ridley here. We got the Tennessee Titans against the Houston Texans, and the Texans, even though they're 0-3, are 7-point favorites. Make it make sense. And the over-under is 38.5. With that being said, the Tennessee Titans allow the sixth most receptions to wide receivers at 14, fourth most receiving yards, 177.67, and one receiving touchdown allowed per game. The Houston Texans actually allow the sixth most targets at 22.33 and eighth most receiving yards at 164.33. I like A.O. Manor because if Derek Stingley's healthy, he's going to be traveling with Calvin Ridley. Calvin Ridley has been a non-factor and will continue to be a non-factor. And I believe A.O. Manor is still an ascending talent. As for Nico Collins, this is the ultimate get-right game of all get-right games. If he doesn't do it this week, I don't know what's going to happen with him moving forward. With that being said, we're going to put him back in the A tier. That is Mr. Nico Collins. As for Alec Manor, he is not a sit, but he is not a definitive start. He's one of those guys where it's like, if you don't have another option, we'll put him in the D tier, and that's where he'll stay. Next game, we got the Washington Commanders in Deebo Samuel. Could be Terry McLaurin. Still no word if he's healthy or not. Versus Drake London and the Atlanta Falcons. The Commanders are 1.5-point dogs. The over-under is 45.0. So let's talk about where this is advantageous. Washington allows the 13th most receiving yards to opposing wide receivers, fourth most yards per reception at 14.61, and tied for third most receiving touchdowns allowed. Translation, they allow a lot of explosives, and Drake London is as explosive of a wide receiver as possible, and it's about time that he gets right. Whereas Atlanta, they allow the eighth most yards per reception at 13.18. If we're talking about a volume play, and we still don't know if Terry McLaurin's going to play or not, we still don't know if Jaden Daniels is going to play or not. So because of the not knowing, we are going to put Deebo Samuel in the C tier, and we're going to put Drake London back into the B tier. And you guys can see right now, like, I'm not very generous when it comes to S tier suggestions for wide receivers. Next game, we got the Indianapolis Colts, who are 3.5-point dogs, coming into Los Angeles for one of the highest implied point totals, if not the highest implied point total on the week. I believe it is 49.5 points. You got Michael Pittman versus Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. And no, we're not going to talk about Josh Downs, even though he could splash, and it's a possibility. It's not a probability, and we like to bet on probabilities. So let's talk about where this is advantageous. The Indianapolis Colts allow one receiving touchdown per week. They also are tied at 11th with 13 receptions allowed per game. And the Los Angeles Rams are the people who are tied with them. They also allow 13 receptions per game and one receiving touchdowns per game. But when you look at how these offenses are designed, the Indianapolis Colts is predicated off of their run-first approach, whereas the Los Angeles Rams just throw at will. And it really is nice to see a team that just throws consistently and is very reliable. It would be nicer to see Puka Nacua find the end zone as a receiving touchdown wide receiver. So we're going to put Puka Nacua in the S tier because that's where he belongs, and that's where we've been saying he belongs all offseason, and people are giving us a hard time. Dude averaged 22 fantasy points per game last year, and he's averaging the same freaking thing this year. Shocker. He's as consistent as it comes. We also have Devontae Adams here for the touchdown upside. He's as reliable as a red zone threat as Kyron Williams in the red zone. I would say he's even more reliable. So for that, he's in the B tier. And then in the C tier, we got Michael Pittman, who is the best wide receiver in that room. It just depends if the pass protection could keep up and protect Danny Dimes, a.k.a. Indiana Jones, from that outstanding pass rush. All right, next game. This game breaks my heart because Brian Thomas Jr. was one of my wide receiver ones coming into the year, and I said it's either going to be Puka Nacua or Brian Thomas Jr. I do have more exposure to Brian Thomas Jr., so that's why it breaks my heart. Let's just be honest. So the Jacksonville Jaguars are 3-point dogs. The over-under is 47. It looks like Ricky Pearsall is getting his starting quarterback back, which is Brock Purdy. And it also looks like Juan Jennings may be ready to go. Still, we don't know. But let's talk about where this is advantageous for the San Francisco 49ers and what the Jacksonville Jaguars allow. They allow the second most targets, 25.33 targets to opposing wide receivers, the third most receptions, 15 to opposing wide receivers, 10th most receiving yards at 163, and tied for third most with a jumble of teams at 1.33. And San Francisco doesn't allow much to opposing wide receivers. Trevor Lawrence has been dog shit, and Brian Thomas Jr. has looked like he's dealing with some demons. But nevertheless, because of his upside, we're going to put both of them in the C tier. Ricky Pearsall is going to be in the C tier because he had an outstanding performance last week against Arizona, and this is a very plus matchup for him. So he has shown the consistency and the reliability. It doesn't matter who the quarterback is throwing him the football. He'll find a way to produce. All right, next game. Another game that breaks my heart because this guy got hurt. All right, and that guy is Xavier Worthy and the Kansas City Chiefs. They are hosting the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are 2.5-point favorites. This game has a 48.5 implied point total, so another really high implied point total. It's not a Sunday night football game, but we'll tell you guys why shortly. So here's the thing. Both defenses allow one receiving touchdown per game, but the Baltimore Ravens allow the third most targets at 24.5, the fourth most receptions to wide receivers at 14, and the 12th most receiving yards at 162. The Chiefs are better than bad, but I mean, they haven't really had to face some phenomenal passing offenses. They've faced the terrible New York Giants pass approach, and the Eagles, even though they lost to the Eagles didn't really have to throw. So if Xavier Worthy's healthy, I will say this, and I will caveat it with this. Like, I'm not anticipating much production. On the other side, you got Zay Flowers, who should be the most explosive player on that offense because, I mean, he's second in yards per separation per route run. And he's just beating defenders left, right, and center. He's just not getting the targets at the volume that we'd like to see. So hopefully they write it because the writing is on the wall. He has been absolutely phenomenal. He's been winning all of his routes. So we're going to put Xavier Worthy in the D tier. You kind of have to start him if he's in your lineup and if he's healthy, but don't expect a lot of receptions and production. And then we're going to put Zay Flowers in the C tier, but he could very well be in the A tier based off of how productive he is on a yards per route basis. Next game, we got the Chicago Bears versus the Las Vegas Raiders. The over-under is 48.5. Very high implied point total as well. And the Bears are 1-point underdogs in this matchup. So let's get into the tail of the tape and why I like this matchup for both receiving rooms. And I mean, you could talk about potentially Luther Burden, but he won't fit my tier list. And DJ Moore could potentially be there. And we loved DJ Moore last week, but it looked like the vast majority of the production went to everybody but him. And Caleb was fantastic at spreading the rock. And as for Jacoby Myers, I understand that the Trey Tucker hype is there, but I'm telling people, like, temporary expectations. It should be Deontay Thornton this week. So let's talk about both of these defenses a lot because this should be a fucking explosion of fantasy football points and production, especially for the wide receiver position. The Chicago Bears allow the sixth most receiving yards at 171.67, the most yards per reception at 17.17. So that longest reception for any Las Vegas Raiders prop is borderline money. Tied for most receiving touchdowns allowed on the season to wide receivers thus far in 3 games at 2. And Las Vegas allows the third most receiving yards to opposing wide receivers at 183.67, the ninth most yards per reception at 13.12, and tied for third most receiving TDs at 1.33. Once again, in that group, in that jumbling. So we're going to break it down. Roma Dunze needs to be in the S tier moving forward. He has been absolutely spectacular. S for special, spectacular, super specimen. We got him in the S tier, and we're going to keep him there until he shows us otherwise. And I don't think he will. And then we got Jacoby Myers in the C tier. He's the safest play in fantasy football. He has the safest floor in fantasy football and will continue to provide a safe floor and a relatively high ceiling. So I do like Jacoby Myers a heck of a lot. All right, Sunday Night Football, we got the Green Bay Packers, who are 7-point favorites, coming off of a catastrophic loss where we thought that Matthew Golden will explode. Matthew Golden did have his best outing as a pro thus far, putting up double-figure fantasy points in PPR format. They are 7-point favorites on Sunday Night Football coming into Dallas. Over under is 47.5. This is the Micah Parsons revenge game. And let's talk about what Dallas allows and why I absolutely love Matthew Golden. Matthew Golden has wide receiver one upside. So does Romeo Doubs. So does Dontavian Wicks. But I'll tell you guys why right now, because the Dallas Cowboys allow the most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers in standard format. They allow 34 fantasy points to opposing wide receivers in standard format. Translation, there's a lot of touchdown production there, whether it be on the ground or in the air, like you'd commonly expect from a wide receiver. Tied for most receiving touchdowns allowed with the Chicago Bears at 2 per game to opposing wide receivers. Second most yards per reception allowed at 16.95, so longest reception is definitely in play. Most receiving yards allowed to wide receivers, 25 more receiving yards allowed, more than the second worst team at 220.33 receiving yards, 10th when it comes to receptions. So translation, they are giving up some freaking explosives, but not a lot of receptions. And Green Bay allows absolutely dog shit and absolutely nothingness. But the reason why we like George Pickens is because CeeDee Lamb is going to be out for the next 2 to 3 weeks with a high ankle sprain. So he's going to get a lot of the volume there. We're not going to add Turpin to our list. We're not going to add Dobbs, because Dobbs, I think his floor is like 6 to 12 fantasy points. Wicks is like 5 to 10 fantasy points. We want the ceiling guys, and we're going to go with the ceiling guys. And George Pickens with volume, scream ceiling, but in several situations, similar in years past, we haven't seen it translate, but we haven't seen that with the Dallas Cowboys. So with that being said, George Pickens will be in the B tier, and we're going to put Matthew Golden in the C tier, where if he's in your lineup, you have to start him. It's a smash matchup, but both of these wide receivers could very easy, just based off of the game script, could be S tier wide receivers. All right, there's not going to be an S tier wide receiver in this game, but there's a possibility where we could get an S tier finish. Monday Night Football, we got 2 Monday Night Football games. We got the New York Jets visiting the Miami Dolphins. The Jets are 3-point underdogs. The over-under is 45. We got Garrett Wilson versus Tyreek Hill, and it's Garrett Wilson and nobody else. That's why we like Garrett Wilson, because of the volume and the volume alone. And they got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Tyreek Hill seems like he's starting to get his footing about him, and this is a plus matchup for him. But Jalen Waddle has been finding the end zone. He has not. So I would say Jalen Waddle is in the D tier as well. We just didn't add him to our tier list here. So let's look at what the Jets allow. The Jets allow the 11th most receiving yards to opposing wide receivers, third most yards per reception, 16.3. So they allow explosives. And if we're talking about who's an explosive wide receiver in football, Tyreek Hill is the definition. You look at the dictionary for explosive wide receiver, it's Tyreek Hill's face there, and he's probably having another baby mama and another child. Dude has like 63 kids. Jesus Christ, make it make sense. We are so toxic right now. It is 9:21, and this is my third video, and we've been doing this all day. I apologize. The Miami Dolphins allow 1.33 receiving touchdowns per game. And the reason why we don't have a lot of statistical anomalies there is because teams have just been able to control the time of possession on the ground. This game screams Breece Hall production. I love Breece Hall in this matchup. So with that being said, I still like Garrett Wilson. I still like Tyreek Hill. They're both starts for me this week. You got to start them. Garrett Wilson's actually going to be in our A tier because of the volume that he's going to get alone. We haven't seen a wide receiver who's going to get lone targets. So I feel like this is a game where we're going to see an explosive game for him in. And then Tyreek Hill, this is a plus matchup for him because Sauce Gardner can't travel and he won't travel with him. And this is why he's in the B tier. All right, last game of the docket. We got the Cincinnati Bengals without Joe Burrow against the Cortland Sutton and Bo Nix. The Bengals are 7-point dogs against the Denver Broncos. The over-under is 44. And let's talk about it. So Cincinnati allows the 8th most targets, but not a lot of fantasy production because they're so terrible and weak on the ground. Denver actually allows 13.33 receptions per game, tied for 5th most, and 4th most targets. So there's something in that defense that, I mean, the defense is so solid on the ground that teams feel like they have to air it out against them and target the wide receiver. But they haven't really been that incredible on the ground. Nevertheless, the time of possession indicates that I'm just trying to convince myself as to why the fuck that's happening, and there's no convincing. So we're just going to fast forward and say S tier, Jamar Chase, no matter what. I don't care who the quarterback is. And Cortland Sutton is in the C tier. He should be higher, but Sean Payton hates your fantasy football lineups. Guys, thank you so much for rocking with me. I appreciate you. If you guys like the video, subscribe if you haven't. We are so close to our goal of 2,000 subscribers. I almost said 7,000 subscribers. That may be a couple of years from now. Nevertheless, guys, made it a priority to get this information out to you. We'll be posting our tight end video tomorrow. That is Wednesday, September 24th, 2025. If you guys want to see our quarterback video or running back video, click these. Like the video. Shout out to our sponsors, Drafters Fantasy. Shout out to our sponsors, Bettor Vision. Download Bettor Vision, guys. It's absolutely incredible. And shout out to our sponsors, Bull Rush. Without them, none of this is possible. Time for the best outro in fantasy football.